Hello, hello. I've got my friend Billy Keels joining me on the show today. Billy is the founder of First Gen Capital Partners, where he helps people focus on tax efficient real estate investments. He's also the host of the Going Long podcast. And I definitely recommend that. Between actionable strategies for financial freedom and how to think about career development and self development, it's packed with great wisdom. Billy's got a history as a high performer, a high earner in the tech sales world. He was crushing it for decades, traveling the world, getting all sorts of benefits, getting great compensation. And then he hit a wall. He started realizing that corporate, the way he was engaging with it, was hurting the life he wanted to live. He wasn't able to show up for himself and for his family and be the person he wanted to be. So he breaks that down in great detail in our show, gets raw, gets vulnerable, shares what he was feeling, what he was thinking, and how he instead reimagined and re-engineered his relationship with corporate and started showing up on his terms and showing up not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And that's a beautiful thing to strive for. You can check out Billy's stuff at firstgencp.com. You can check out the show notes for all access to his podcast and other resources, but definitely give Billy a listen. And one last thing before we get started, if Uncage Yourself is adding a lot of value to your life, it would mean the world to me if you hopped on over right now to Apple Podcasts and or Spotify and left a quick, honest review. It means the world to me. It helps spread the show and get the mission out there to help people really supercharge their lives by owning their 9 to 5. So thank you so much. Let's get into it with Billy. Growing up, society taught you to follow the script by choosing a career path and climbing the ladder. But for many people, this promise falls flat. Work suffocates them and life becomes painful. Here, you're trapped in what I call the corporate cage. Fortunately, there's a way out. You can take control of your corporate job and unlock a life of freedom. I call this living uncaged. Hi, this is your host, Matt Doan. I'm a coach, creator, and entrepreneur. Uncaging people is my mission because it's been my exact life journey. This show provides you the stories, principles, and tactics to make it happen. Welcome to Uncage Yourself. Billy, my friend, welcome to the show.
Matt, what's up, man? I am looking forward to this. Really looking forward to this.
For those that are listening, this is take 2 after a technical snafu, and it's just a beautiful opportunity to reconnect. So Here we are, Billy.
Love it, man. Love it.
Let's rock and roll. Hey, something to get us started here.
Yeah.
You're in Barcelona, as you're got to say it the right way right now. One of my favorite places in the whole wide world.
Yep.
But tell me, what do you love about Europe, but what do you also miss about the U.S.?
A lot of stuff, man. A lot of stuff. And so, Matt, but I'm a fellow podcaster, man. And so I just have to say this because I appreciate you so much. And it's really important to me to do this. So, and I know how much you put into this, like absolutely spectacular in terms of helping us to help every single listener and viewer. And so everybody, if you're already watching and listening, if you have not taken just a couple seconds to literally leave an honest written review and rating for the podcast, please do that. It allows Matt to actually get out there and connect with more people to bring you the stories, the examples, the frameworks that you are going to need to move forward faster. So with that stated, I do want to talk about, I guess being in Europe. So being here in Europe, the things that I like about Europe, is that what it was, Matt? The things that I like the most about it?
Yeah. What do you miss about the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, what I miss about the U.S., that part's easy. So I'll answer that first. And it really is being able to have moments with family and friends. And what I mean by that is parents, friends I grew up with, because I decided to live here in Europe. And so as a result, most of the time that I spend is actually here. So a lot of things growing up, friends' weddings, being available for time with nieces, nephews that are on the other side of the pond. Those are moments now as I get older that I really cherish. So those are the things that I miss the most, or the moments that I miss the most in the US. The things that I absolutely adore about Europe are And as I think about this, it's just the proximity of so many different cultures, pasts, languages, insights is something that from the moment I landed in Paris in 2001, and even before that, because I'd had a chance to work and travel throughout some 58 countries, when I recognized proximity, like even where I live in Barcelona, if I travel an hour and a half north, I'm in a different language, different culture, different history. If I'm in France, or if I go to the West, then I'm in Portugal and it's a couple more hours, but it's completely different. And so I love that because it allows my mind to always recognize new things. It's that, that beginner's mind that people talk about. And that's one of the things that I absolutely love about Europe. I love being able to leave my home because I live in a city center, to go meet up with friends very quickly, whether it's a cup of coffee, a glass of wine, a dinner. And those are things that I didn't get growing up in Columbus, Ohio. And I really appreciate that about where I live in Europe and the European experiences that I've had.
Beautiful. The Mediterranean vibe too. Let's not discount that overall, right? Those blue waters. My hope, my soul is there too. It just makes me think, Billy, about the importance of the environment and how intentional you are. And that can be environment in different ways, whether it's the immediacy of the people you're surrounding yourself with, the career path that you're in, the job you're in, your physical surroundings, all these things. If you let them become too stagnant and you get comfortable and get in that comfort zone and you sit there for too long in whatever environment that is, you're inhibiting your growth. And it's upon us to shock our systems and continually level up our inner circle, where we are, new cultures, new difficult things that challenge us, that stimulate our minds and keep us wanting more and being more.
Yeah, and so I remember not too long ago you were talking about this, actually, just like that whole default path. And when you go on that default path, it's easy to happen, and for a certain period of time that also happened to me. And I think the reason that it happened to me, as I start to reflect on it, is because where I came from, financially, specifically financially, right? There were a lot of things that I did not have because my parents could not afford to allow for us to have certain things. And then I was surrounded in school districts with a lot of my friends that actually had the material things that that I thought were important at the time. And so what I realized is I watched my parents work really, really hard. And so they instilled that work ethic in me. And because I was an A student, I did the hard work. And then I went and got a test, got an A on the test. Then I realized I got the recognition because I was an A student, and all that kind of stuff just was a self-fulfilling kind of like a cycle, or I don't want to say prophecy, but you know what I mean? And that's what happened early on. But then that actually same thing happened in the corporate life, right? As I went to my work in my professional setting, it was, how do you work hard? How do you go out? You get the right job, and you continue to move up the path. And I never questioned the path. And so somewhere along the journey, I just got into this loop where I was like, okay, well, cool. And it happens to a lot of people. I mean, I know you help people constantly with this, but that was me. I was getting in the job. I was became in the top talent program and looking for the promotion, and got the promotion. And then after the promotion, it was almost at a certain point where I was on cruise control, and I didn't really even know, I didn't question why I was doing all the extra work, going for the next position. And it took me a while to realize that, but I was very quickly consumed in just following a default path that, I learned very early on in life, because it was about working hard, getting the good grades, getting the recognition, and not really questioning anything else. So that you talk about happened to me early on in life, happened to me later in life. And because I'm now aware of that, I was really aware of it in the last probably last 5 years of my corporate role. It just something, once you recognize it, it's difficult to go back to.
Yeah. This is explained, these default path choices, by mimetic theory, which is basically what we're surrounded by, we adopt as our own wants. So if we see someone wanting more titles or more compensation or this type of life or this type of car, subconsciously, we adopt those wants as our own. And in that sense, they're no longer our own, right? We are actually just absorbing what everyone else wants. And we have to have this very conscious, intentional way to step back and be like, okay, what might I really want? What kind of exercises can I push myself through? What kind of people and ideas can I expose myself to actually understand my value system and what I really want, the features of the lifestyle, the career I want? And that's a very hard thing to do, to decouple from what everyone else has subconsciously been programming you to do.
Yeah, it's scary. It's definitely scary. It's scary to do that. And then, and I know you go through this a lot, but, or you've talked to people and helped to extract that, but it's really scary when you go through it. And then the thing that also happens is it's really scary when you recognize that that's happening to you and you are allowing not your own worldview to create the path in front of you. And so if you don't create your own path, I mean, of course you can learn from other people, but if you don't create your own path, it's really easy to be so far down the line, you realize, well, hang on a second, I'm living somebody else's life, or I'm following somebody else's dream, or I'm following somebody else's path. And along the way, all of the people, the relationships, the moments that really were a part of your essence. I mean, I speak to this from personal experience, right? These things were part of my essence. I realized that I wasn't making them a priority. I wasn't focusing the time and energy. And once I snapped out of it, it was like, wow, life started really changing. But it's very scary and it's very easy to fall into that trap.
Absolutely. So you gave us a good background there on growing up, Billy. You had this more default path mentality, and we didn't know anybody. We were all given that story growing up, right? Like, so we had to figure out our own way if we wanted to live a life that was different. So as you got into your career, as you got into adulthood, some things started changing for you. Could you give us some of that play-by-play?
Yeah, the biggest thing that really transformed and started happening for me was one of the things was right after college. So I went to college. I had 2 degrees. The year before my second degree, I had a chance to work and live overseas. And when I lived overseas, it did something that changed my just mindset. It really awakened something in me to say, hey, look, there's more out there to the world. I went and ironically lived in Valencia, Spain, on a program through the University of Virginia. But one of the reasons that I did that was because right before I had actually been rejected from my dream job. And I thought in my mind, Matt, that when I did this overseas experience, coming back, speaking a new language, although I really didn't, having had the overseas experience, that was going to really get me a shoe in to go and get the role that I was looking for, because I was focused on, I had to get out there and work for a company, Procter & Gamble, P&G. That was like the dream job. I got rejected twice. And so that was very difficult. You can imagine for me, someone who was an A student and used to, you do the work, you get the result. You do the work, you get the result. And so although it was tough for me to go through that rejection, I realized that thanks to a very good friend of mine, he helped me to understand that there was a new opportunity for these people that were traveling all around the world. And so they were working with Fortune 500 CEOs and things like that. So through this rejection twice event, my world actually completely changed, because I went through this process where about people, I think there were 6,000 resumes, and I was actually one of 26 people that was selected to start working in this role. It was basically traveling around the globe with Fortune 500 CEOs. So really, in 5 years, I'd worked and traveled throughout 58 countries. So my entire paradigm of my life, Matt, started to change, because I was really focused or really a challenge to kind of say, all right, well, I grew up in this particular way, but although I'm here for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I wanted to get out. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to see things. And so recognizing that people had a different way of viewing the world than I did, sometimes it was a little bit challenging. But then after a while, what that did for me was it started to spark my interest. I wanted to start to understand, well, why is this gentleman who's been working at this hotel in the hills of West Virginia, he loves standing here every single day in his wonderful doorman suit, when I would think to myself, well, why would he ever want to do that? But when you sat down and you talked to him, because I was standing at the front door, you understand his story. You understand the pride in the second generation of family. And so you start thinking, well, okay, well, even though I wouldn't do that, how, what can I do to start to engage with more people? And that was just, I give a US example, but when you start talking to somebody who's in the Tierra del Fuego in Argentina or China or wherever the case may be. And the reason I'm saying this is because all of this happened because what I thought was supposed to be my path, which was to go graduate from college, get 2 degrees, go and work in this job, when that did not happen, and I pivoted, my world changed. And so since then, I had that role. I've had a chance to travel throughout 86 countries. I've managed large businesses across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've learned multiple language, 4 additional languages. And these are all things that happened as a result of rejection and being able to move in a different direction and really helping to change and open I don't know if it's changed my worldview, but really open my mind to accepting other things.
Hey, Matt here. Just a quick break from our show. If you're picking up what I'm putting down on this episode, I want you to run on over to uncagedworkshop.com. There, you'll find something I'm really proud of. I put my heart and soul into a transformative masterclass, helping you go from caged to uncaged. I promise it'll shock you out of conformity and having you want so much more out of work and life. So head on over to uncagedworkshop.com and check it out. All right, back to the show. Wow. You can feel how formative that is as you started to open your mind and explore new things and understand just really what you were capable of and what you wanted. I know your time in corporate, you were a high performer and you were there pretty recently too.
Yeah.
But you came to some conclusions on what that world was and wasn't for you. Could you describe that, please?
Yeah. So once again, so this path and being able to go the corporate path, because this, in my mind, I wanted to become the CEO of a company, and that's really what I wanted to do. And I had it in my mind again, and I was working and I was moving towards the goals and I was climbing up the ladder. And so that is exactly what I wanted to be able to do. And at the same time, Matt, I got married along the way. I was a young father, and being a young father, I also had, these ideas. Like I come from a divorced household. My parents got divorced early on. And so I know what that's like to have, live in different places, right? Not the only one. It happens to a lot of people, of course, as you know. But one of the things I told myself is I really wanted to be present. And I was thinking physically present, right? And I remember as I was going along this corporate dream and I was traveling and I was doing all the things, I allowed me chasing my corporate priorities to supersede my life priorities. And that manifests itself the night before my son's 3rd birthday. And, it's something I didn't used to tell, but now that more that I do talk about it, I realize I'm not the only one. I used to be really ashamed of this, right? Because, the night before my son's 3rd birthday, like I had a terrible night's sleep. And the reason I had a terrible night's sleep was because the next morning, Matt, I was traveling to Frankfurt, Germany from Barcelona. And I remember having a bad night's sleep, and I woke up early that morning, because my flight was at like 7:00 from Barcelona airport. I woke my wife and my 1-year-old up, woke them out of bed, so that we could all sing happy birthday to my 3-year-old. And when that happened, it was kind of like, all right, I was going through the motions. But then as I left the house and I got in the elevator and I was leaving my home, leaving the building to go to the airport, I started not even feeling well even more. But it really hit me that night, because that night, my wife and 2 kids and my in-laws were all together singing happy birthday to my oldest son. And so that was the moment where I recognized that I allowed myself chasing a corporate dream to overtake what I really wanted in life. And so that was the moment that I realized that there was this like click. And I was like, I don't like this. I'm not going to allow this to continue to happen to me. So that was the moment where things in my life and the way that I perceived my role within a big company was going to change. And my corporate experience, and I know you and I have chatted about this, super positive. And at the same time, I got lost along the way. And so it was when I was able to find myself within the constructs of the corporate. And it took me a while. It didn't happen right away, but eventually I found where I needed to be and found where my place was within the overall corporate life. It was hard for me. But once I found that and went through, had some struggles as well at home, at the office, I eventually got to a place where I was very, very happy being a corporate contributor without going beyond the boundaries that I'd set for myself and my life priorities.
Let me drill into that point right there, because that's where a lot of people are stuck right now. You've got high performer, mid-career professionals
Yeah,
right now listening to this,
yeah,
and they might feel stuck. They've got all these sunk costs, all this time invested in, and they're skilled and they have to provide for their family.
yeah.
Yet they want to make corporate work. They want to show up on their terms, but they don't really know what that means. Could you describe when you found your fit?
Mhm.
What were your criteria? What did that feel like for you?
Yeah. So in right. So one of the things that happened was when you are a high performer, you're in the top talent program. I was in the top talent program. I was going to Hawaii every other year because I was overachieving against the quotas or sales leadership, right? Because that's the world I lived in the enterprise software space in the last 16 years of my career. And so it goes back to what happens when you're a kid. When you go through, you get the test in the corporate world, you make the right alliances internally, you do the work, you get the results, you expect the promotion, and that becomes the default path. And so it's I wish someone would have been able to pull me to the side to say, hey man, look, or I just could have spoken to somebody or listened to a podcast like yours, right, to get some new ideas. But it's something that high performers will go through and go through frequently. I was speaking to somebody yesterday going through the exact same thing. But it's about being able to set your boundaries, whatever those boundaries are for you, right? For instance, for me, it was a moment, the last couple of years, I turned down 7 different opportunities to enter into promotion or like selection process. Why? Because I recognized that was going to be being on more planes, being in more meetings, preparing more stuff. And at that point in my life, like this happened later, I recognized that was not the priority because every plane ride and overnight meant time away from my family, which I didn't want to do any longer. I wasn't skilled enough at the time to really go in and be able to negotiate or have that conversation. I learned that later on. But when you're a high performer, the benefit that you have, or at least I found this in my case, right? One of the things was I was performing at a high level. So if I was able to have the conversation to say, hey, listen, I will continue to give you the result because at the end of the day, and I recognize this because now that I'm no longer part of the organization, like the machine keeps moving without you. When you can show that you can provide the result, that's one of the things that the company cares about. So when I was able to show like, listen, I'm going to continue to give the results that you need. I'm going to continue to overachieve against my quota, which means I don't need to be at every single meeting. I'm not going to do like the extra meetings just so I could see people and be there and understand what they were thinking because I wanted to be able to have them as part of my alliance when I got the next promotion. As I went through that and I recognized where my own life priorities were, that's when I was able to come out of it on the other side. And so when I recognized that I was going to continue to achieve as a high performer one way or the other, then I learned how to start having those conversations, being very clear about what my contribution would be. And then also starting to be okay with not being at all the meetings and not, doing the extra projects because those extra projects eventually, the extra corporate projects were taking me away from the life fulfillment that I was looking for. And I wanted to continue to be a really productive, positive employee, which I feel like I was until the very last day of my employment. And so hopefully it gives an idea, but just wanted to talk. I know it wasn't really easy initially for me, but through going through this and now being able to listen to other people, it's have that confidence in yourself, be able to have those conversations and set the boundaries, making sure that you're continuing to contribute and be a productive employee. Because if you're not, then the conversation becomes a very, very different one.
It does. I like your focus on outcomes, not hours, right? The idea that you knew where your zone of genius was, where you could contribute the most value for your organization, where you could be both a role model and someone that delivered. And you fixated there. And then you asked yourself, what do I now need to say no to at work so that I can be high value there and be high value at home for yourself and for your family? And that's a very difficult thing for people to wrestle with. The experiment I often work with a lot of my coaching clients where we say, okay, we don't want to get promoted anymore. We say no to the promo path. So we develop another path called maintain. And the maintain path, which is basically what you said, like, I want to be high value. I want to make sure my reputation's intact and it's really strong and I'm delivering results and I'm getting my compensation and all that sort of thing. But it's a very different set of choices to methodically reduce how much time you're spending there, focus on the essential things, make careful choices. And the funny thing is, when I have people implement this, I ask them after the fact, okay, so and so, you stopped showing up to all the meetings, you opted out of things, you focused on what mattered most. Did anything bad happen? And they're like, no, I actually got promoted or my reputation got better. And it's funny because when you see someone who's in control and assertive and a little bit scarce, this goes to like laws of power, like Robert Greene type stuff. When you look at that sort of thing, someone that's scarce and has self-respect, you respect them more because they're abnormal. They're doing things outside of the crowd. And you're like, wow, look what he really gives a damn about himself and his family, and he's still delivering here. He's got an aura about him. I admire him. There's something very powerful about that.
Yeah, hugely powerful. And I don't know if you see this, Matt, but as I'm now, whatever, 7 months removed, more or less, or 8 months almost, sometimes I look back on it and I realize like I didn't actually have to be there. I wanted to be there. Or I felt like if I weren't there, and this is early on, like this was before I actually got clear on. And so I love the exercise that you go through with your coaching students, because what it also helps you to recognize is you're not necessarily the center of the world that you think you are. Although you are a high performer, things can still happen in a productive way without you. And you get a chance to focus on other priorities outside of the office as well. Sometimes you want to believe, and this was because I was also, you talked about outcomes. I mean, being in sales and sales leadership, it really was about the outcomes, because it wasn't, I know one thought, are you spending 500 hours on this or are you spending 5 hours on this? Because the result was what we were looking for: happy clients, continued investment, things like that. And so sometimes we also have to do that self-reflection to say, are we doing this because it's really about us, or is it because we want to do it to be recognized by others? And there's a little bit of a difference between the two, but sometimes you have to also check, or I had to check my ego and recognize that, hey, I'm kind of doing some of this for myself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people that I end up speaking with or working with. So step one is kind of controlling the 9 to 5, making it work for them. There's lots of room there to make it more flexible and on your terms. I'd say in almost every case, though, these high performers, they've got so many gifts locked up inside of them, Billy, that they can't possibly unleash within a corporate realm. It's too rigid. It's too much in a box. And they need an avenue, an outlet to pursue that. And oftentimes it's professional interests, skills, a business they want to build. So I'm often like helping them build side hustles, which may, create a ramp to full-time entrepreneurship at some point in the future. You had that version for you over a period of time. I would love if you could talk about that entrepreneurial side outside of corporate. What was pulling at you and where has it ended? Where are you now with all of it?
Yeah, so appreciate that. And so one of the things that happened when I missed my son's 3rd birthday is I recognized that a part of why I did what I did was because I was still keeping part of my value, not only to the roles that I had, but also the amount of money that was coming in. And I realized that the real stream of income that I had was from my job, because in 2000, there was the dot-com bubble. So I'd started investing and I lost there. And then in 2008, I lost 33% of my investment portfolio. And so, but I didn't do anything, even though I started thinking about doing things, Matt. I was reading, I was becoming like this theoretical ninja, but it took, unfortunately, me deciding to go to that business meeting in Frankfurt to recognize I'm not doing enough. I'm thinking, I'm studying, but I'm not doing. And so what I wanted to do is, for me, it was really important to create that financial security, to be able to say, I don't have to take a trip in the future if I don't really want to. I'll just take a personal day off, knowing that there are other streams of income coming into my home. So I went down a path where I decided to to invest more of my own time, my energy, and eventually my own money, capital, currency, however you want to call it, into real assets. So things like a mobile home park and different real estate ventures and different hard asset ventures. And I was doing that while I was working at the company that I was working at in sales and sales leadership. So very much frontline. And it took me a decade to be able to get to a point where I knew that I was going into the role really because I wanted to, not because I had to. Um, of the 10 years that I was doing that, probably it took the first 6 years. The last 3.5, 4 years, I was just going into the role because I wanted to go into the role. But what that allowed me to do, which sometimes is pretty interesting for people to recognize, but I believe I became a better employee for the company when I was actually going in because I wanted to, not because I had to. I always liked the corporate role. Like I liked my corporate experience. But when I recognized that I had my financial life taken care of because I was making decisions that were not all of them right, some of them were wrong, and still continue to make mistakes. But I became a better employee because I was going in because I wanted to, not because I had to, not because I had to get this paycheck, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as I started investing in different assets that were generating cash flow, which for me is the most important thing, and also providing me with really strong tax benefits, which meant I get to keep more of what I was investing. It set up a really nice runway for me. And I thought that I would leave the corporate world. And I think we've talked about this before, Matt, but it's in a very similar way that my son's third birthday and missing that made me really start to take action. I was very fortunate because I'd been doing the work for about a decade. And in the latter part of last year, my father got really ill. And so when my dad got ill, I was also at this moment, I'm in the ICU with my dad, and I'm looking at him, and I'm looking at all these machines, and I'm thinking to myself, I really like my job, but like I've missed a lot of stuff. To one of your questions that you asked in the very beginning, like what are the things that I miss? And I recognized that, and that moment was what helped me to crystallize that, hey, listen, I like my corporate role, but there's something that's more important right now. And there's something else. There are, family members that I love, a lot of time that I've missed that I want to dedicate more time, right? Because that's the ultimate asset, which it took me a while to realize that that's the ultimate asset. It's not the amount of money. It's how are you investing your time with the people that you love the most, and doing the things that bring you the most joy, that bring you the most energy. So fortunately, I had those, once again, negative experiences the investments that I had were not working for me. I missed my son's third birthday, and then it made me move into taking action. And I did that for over a decade while I was working in my corporate job. And then another non-financial thing happened, my father getting ill, that really made me once again kind of switch and make another pivot to say, hey, look, I want to invest my time, the quality time that I have with the people that I love the most, and also be able to share and talk to others that feel the same kind of predicament. Because ultimately, I think when you have your financial life taken care of outside of your 9 to 5, when you can get to that point, it makes you a much better employee. Because I felt like it made me a much better employee. So hopefully I didn't ramble too much there.
Healthy person is a healthy worker, right? You did things outside of that place. You weren't dependent on it. You created a life, a financial situation, a home life that gave you the option to go to work, and you found a fit, an environment that worked for you, and you showed up as the best person you could be. That's wonderful. That's how you do the 9 to 5 right.
Yeah, and you know what? When I think about it, because I didn't see that growing up, so it was difficult. Because what I saw at home was work harder, just work more hours, because that's what my parents were taught. And so it took me a while to recognize, and also learning from the mistakes of others, because if you can learn from other people's mistakes, why not do that? And being able to recognize, like, hey, look, I don't want to just continue to do more hours. And in the life events that happen, you start recognizing, okay, well, how do I take more of that control and apply it? Like I said, I made mistakes. Not everything was done right, but as quickly as possible, when I made the mistakes, it was about, what have I learned from this? What can I apply moving forward so that I can minimize the probability of this exact same mistake happening again in the future, and just continuing to be able to build momentum and go from there.
You said you were often a theoretical ninja out of the gate, right? Observing, learning. But what is learning without application, right? And going through failure. And the funny thing is, we all want to shortcut failures that we see other people go through. And we're like, if we learn it all, then we can shortcut it all and go straight to success. But there's something wild about us all having to go through our own version of failure after failure after failure. But it can only be by applying learnings and stretching towards things that scare you, like building a real estate investment portfolio that excites you on the side of the 9 to 5 with an aim of creating a lifestyle that keeps you mobile and present for your family. I mean, that's scary. You're going to have to go through failures, but there's no other way. We're human.
Completely agree. And it's one of those things that also too, for me, for a while, I struggled with. It's one of the things that I'm very aware of today because I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? When you are used to going through, you got the results, it's the same. Right? All these things start to manifest themselves even later in life. And you realize that, okay, you have to do the work and you can attempt to minimize the issues, the mistakes, but unless you're doing, you're not actually growing, because that is like, it's almost like it's like riding a bike. Like you can understand how to do it, but unless you're actually doing it, and you're going to fall no matter how many classes you take and all this kind of stuff, you're going to have to fall once or twice to get your equilibrium. You may take a course in a place that has some extra padding, and yeah, you could do that just like with life, but eventually you're going to have to do the work, and you're going to test what the theory that you actually know, and hopefully you make a minimal mistake. The thing is don't make the mistakes that are so bad that you can't ever come back from, right? I think that's one of the things that you have to be aware of. But aside from that, 99% of the things and things that you try, if you make a mistake, you live to talk about it the next day. You learn. It's another story that you can tell your family, your friends, your loved ones, and also help them grow. But without a doubt, 100% agree with you that you, as an individual, you have to do the work. You have to be willing to make the mistake, because that is where the growth component comes from. And that's where your experience is related to. And that's why, I think about today, like being able to talk to people that you may live in one continent and invest in a hard asset in a different place. Well, why? Because I've done that. I've done it for over a decade. I know how to do it. I know how to help other people do it. But I didn't do it perfectly the first time. I know what it's like to lose 5 figures, 6 figures, because that's kind of what happens when you're going through this process.
Yeah.
And being able to share it with other people so that they don't make exactly the same mistakes, that's key.
But we can't stay comfortable, because today's comfort is tomorrow's decline, right?
Definitely.
Wow, powerful. Billy, do you mind if we flip to some rapid fire questions?
I'm absolutely fine with that, my friend.
I can't wait to see what's on your brain for the second go around. Let's see how different it is from the first go around. All right, my friend, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
My probably the thing that I think about, and maybe it's not a piece of advice, but it was the thing that my dad said to me back in September of 2001. And when I were at the airport, we were at JFK, and I was getting ready to get on a flight to Paris, France. And I said, I'll see you in a year, because that was the whole point. Like I was just doing a 1-year sabbatical. And I remember him looking at me and saying, son, you're not coming back. Enjoy yourself. And I thought, man, are you serious? I'll be back. It's been 21 years, 3 countries, a marriage, 2 children, and 3 additional languages. So it wasn't necessarily advice, but it was just one of those things that it sticks to me to this day. And, they talk about your parents knowing you better than you know yourself. That was one of those moments where, he kind of saw it.
It's wild when they can have that perspective.
Really well.
Doesn't have to be advice, but along these lines, what's the worst piece of advice you've received?
Well, it's to the effect of, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. Do it because you're supposed to do it. Go for the promotion. Well, why? Because you're going to and I think about it in a corporate context, because that's the way that enters into my mind. Well, go for it because it's the next logical step. Well, I did the next logical step for such a long time that I started realizing there is no logical step for me. It's the thing that makes my life more fulfilled, gives me more energy. So that would be the worst type of advice in general that I receive, is do it next because it's the next logical thing to do.
If you could invent one law that everyone had to follow, Billy, what would that be?
The law of being uncomfortable. And the reason I was talking to somebody the other day, and when you can be uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable, or maybe not even be okay with being uncomfortable, but understand what it feels to be uncomfortable, Matt, I believe that that helps you to empathize more with others. And that empathy is what creates connection. What do I mean by that? Like, so I've learned 4 additional languages. I've traveled to 86 countries. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. And so I know what it's like to be at a table with people that don't speak the same language as you, don't have the same cultural references as you, and everybody's laughing at the table, and I'm the only non-local looking around at everybody. That feels very uncomfortable. The first time, the second time, the fifth time, until you start to actually understand. But you've got to be willing to be there and be uncomfortable for a long enough time. Like I use my example in Spain. Now, a number of years later, my wife is Spanish, so a lot of that, these kinds of things help. But today, when I sit at a table and everyone's laughing, I understand what they're laughing about because I understand the culture, I understand the language. That's just as an example. But then on the flip side, what that does, and what I mean from an empathy perspective is, now when I see somebody else who's trying to learn a language, learn a new skill, I know what it feels like to be uncomfortable. I know what it feels like to not want to have to ask, or maybe in your own language, you're fantastic, or your own natural skill, you're phenomenal. But when you've been in that type of situation, it just creates an empathy. It creates that curiosity and also that willingness to help others. And I think that that creates a connection with other people.
Yeah. Being uncomfortable creates empathy, and then you can grow so much more from there.
Yeah.
If you were starting your career right now, the end of 2022, what advice would you give yourself?
It's not all about the money. It is about how you're investing your time in the moments that matter the most and protect those moments. Because you can't get those moments back. Like, and if you have, and I don't, and so, and I mentioned before, like I know what it's like. I watched both my parents. They didn't have another choice, right? As they say in Spanish, entre comillas, but like, which is kind of like the fingers in the air sort of thing. I don't know how to, I don't know. I get stuck sometimes, Matt. But when you are in those types of situations, like I know what it's like to see my parents, they felt like they didn't have another choice. They didn't know what to do. And so I say that from a place of understanding what it's like to feel like you don't have another choice. But when you do, it's just, it's one of those things. Yeah. I don't know how much.
Something I love about, especially like Gen Z in the workforce, you see this open mindset mentality of there are the idea of pathways don't even make sense. It's just like a jungle gym to go play on, and you're not being beholden to making the right choice out of the gate. But if you embody that mindset about the ability to just explore and be what you can be and test and don't stay stuck, wow, the world's your oyster.
Yeah, it really is, especially when you're just getting started, right? You're not 15, 20 years later with more priorities, family, other financial responsibilities, things like that. It's just, it's a different moment in time.
Yeah. Few wrap ups for us, Billy. What does uncaged mean to you?
It is one of those things where I had a lot of different thoughts on this, but when you're in a mental space where you have the feeling of freedom to choose the things that you want to do with the people with whom you want to do, when you want to do, I feel like that is being uncaged, and that can be in your personal life, in your professional life. There's nothing like having that feeling of freedom to choose what you want to do. I just think that's ultimately, because when you can choose what you want to do, it really comes down to how are you investing your time, I think. And that's the thing that resonates with me about what uncaged means to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're very similar. Autonomy is king, right? Money is a tool.
Yep. Yes.
Billy, where can people connect with you online, and how can you help them?
I love what you do here, man. This is just absolutely awesome. It's just really awesome. So you can connect with me. firstgencp.com is the company where we are really focused on helping first generation accredited investors to be able to, help you on your path to becoming uncaged. Also, have a podcast, the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels. It's listened to now in over 45 countries, something like that. And I love LinkedIn. So I think I'm the only Billy Keels in Barcelona, Matt. So if anyone wants to connect, just let me know that you heard Matt and I speaking here, and a personalized invitation there on LinkedIn, and that would be great. And I think one of the things that also helped me at the end of my corporate career was really figuring out kind of what are some of the things that I could be doing to help myself get uncaged. We've even written a little guide about what that means, especially if you, from an investment perspective, an accredited investor, and you want to find out more, you can go to firstgencp.com/pay less tax, and being able to use more of your capital to ultimately get you to the path to freedom sooner. So those are, I think, the best ways to contact or to learn more about what it is that we're doing and how we're helping others. And Matt, like I said, man, I appreciate you so much and the things that you're doing here and helping people to uncage themselves, especially in that corporate construct, because there's so many positive things that can happen within the corporate world when you understand sooner rather than later how to make the maximum benefit of that environment. So thanks for everything you're doing, man.
I'm just proud to be out here beating the drum with you, Billy. I mean, you are a shining example of how to take ownership of a default path in the corporate world, right? There's a lot of people that are just dying to get out, and they're screaming like, I can't take this anymore. You didn't go down that path. You had some pain, but you took control. You stepped back. You were reflective and said, this place provides me utility, and I can find my own version of joy within it. It just takes me showing up and exerting my agency. It's entirely possible. And you spent years, the last few years in particular, showing up because you wanted to, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. And that's a shining example of what I want people to take away is you can make the 9-to-5 be that stable, enjoyable thing on your terms, and you can explore your highest potential on the side, much like you have. So keep doing that, my friend.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right. Appreciate you. Take care.
All right, man.
Hey, Matt here. Thanks for listening to Uncage Yourself. For show notes and more content like this, head over to uncageyourself.fm. And if you liked what you heard, I'd appreciate you leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Until next time, be well, my friend.